I never really knew my neighbor. Her name was Miss Holloway, but to me, she was just the woman who lived across the street. We never spoke, never even waved at each other. But every night, I'd see her standing in her window motionless, staring out into the street. At first, I thought she was just watching the neighborhood. Then, I realized something was off, because she wasn't watching anything at all. It was late, past 2 a.m., when I first noticed her. I had just finished gaming for the night, about to turn off my bedroom light, when something in the corner of my eye caught my attention. A shape. A pale figure standing in the window of the house across the street. At first, I thought I was imagining it. I leaned in closer, pressing my forehead against the glass. She was still there, standing perfectly still, her face too pale, her hands flat against the window pane. Something about her posture sent a chill through me, like she wasn't supposed to be there, like she wasn't in control of her own body. I reached for my phone, debating whether to text my mom. Then she blinked, a slow, deliberate blink, but her expression didn't change. Her eyes never moved. I felt my stomach drop. I reached for my phone, my fingers hesitating before typing. "Me, do you think Miss Holloway is okay?" A minute passed, then another. Finally, "Mom, what are you talking about?" I glanced back out the window, and my heart stopped. She was gone. The window was empty. A cold wave of nausea rolled through me. I stared for a few more seconds, waiting to see if she'd come back. Maybe she had just walked away. Maybe I imagined the whole thing. Then, just as I was about to close my blinds, her porch light flickered on, and her front door creaked open. I held my breath. A shadow moved in the doorway. Then, too slowly, Miss Holloway stepped outside. I squinted. Her arms hung limply at her sides. Her head was tilted at a strange angle, like her neck couldn't quite support her weight. Then, she started walking toward my house. I stumbled back from the window, my pulse slamming against my ribs. No. I grabbed my phone, fingers shaking as I typed. "Me, Mom. Miss Holloway is coming to our house." Nothing. I bolted down the hall, bursting into my mom's room. She sat up immediately, squinting in the dark. "What's wrong?" I didn't get a chance to answer, because that's when we heard it. The doorbell. Mom froze. Her sleepy confusion shifted to cold fear. She grabbed her phone and pulled up the security camera. Her face drained of color. "What the hell?" she whispered. I leaned over her shoulder. My stomach twisted. Standing on our porch, perfectly still, was Miss Holloway. Her face was too pale. Her clothes hung off her like they didn't quite fit her body anymore. And her eyes. They were just wrong. Too dark. Too empty. Like something had hollowed her out from the inside. She didn't blink. Didn't even move. She just stood there, waiting. Mom's voice was tight. "Did you see her come over?" I nodded, swallowing hard. She exhaled sharply. "Okay. We're not answering the door." I expected her to call 911. To call Mr. Holloway, at the very least. Instead, she just sat there, staring at the screen. I could tell she was afraid to move. The minutes crawled by. Miss Holloway didn't leave. She just stood there. Then, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Don't let her in." My body turned ice cold. I looked at my mom. "Did you just text me?" She shook her head, her hands clenching into fists. I checked the cameras again. Miss Holloway was closer now, standing right against the door, her forehead almost pressed to the wood. Then, in a single, jerky motion, she lifted her hand and started scratching. Not knocking, not ringing the bell, just scratching. Slow, rhythmic. SHRRK, SHRRK, SHRRK. Mom sucked in a sharp breath. "Jesus Christ," she whispered. "What is she doing?" I didn't answer. I didn't know. Then, she stopped. She tilted her head, like she was listening to something we couldn't hear. Then, in one slow, sickening movement, she bent backward. Her spine arched unnaturally, her body folding in a way that shouldn't have been possible. Then, she crawled off the porch. Not walked. Crawled. Like a spider. Her limbs moving wrong, her joints clicking with every step. Then, she vanished into the dark. We didn't sleep after that. Mom stayed up watching the cameras until sunrise. When we checked the footage the next morning, it wasn't there. Everything had recorded perfectly, except from 2:17 a.m. to 3:02 a.m. It was just static, like nothing had happened at all. Like Miss Holloway had never been there. That afternoon, we saw Mr. Holloway outside. He was loading boxes into his car. He looked pale. like he hadn't slept in days. Mom hesitated before calling out, "Everything okay?" He paused. Then, in a quiet voice, "My wife passed away 3 days ago." I felt my whole body go numb. Mr. Holloway gave us a tired smile. She went peacefully. Then, he got in his car and drove away. We never saw him again. That night, I had a nightmare. I was standing at my bedroom window, and in the reflection now, right behind me, Miss Holloway was smiling. I always thought home invasions were loud. Broken glass, forced doors, people screaming. But I was wrong, because when it happened to me, I never heard a thing. It started with a single drawer left open. I noticed it in the morning while making coffee. One of the kitchen drawers, slightly pulled out, like someone had been looking for something. I live alone. I don't sleepwalk. I was sure I hadn't left it open, but I brushed it off. Maybe I had been half asleep the night before. Maybe I had opened it without thinking. It was nothing. At least, that's what I told myself. The next day, it happened again. Except this time, it wasn't a drawer. It was the basement door. Not wide open, just cracked, like someone had peeked inside and forgotten to close it. I felt a sickening twist in my gut. I never went into the basement. I barely even remembered having a basement. The house was old, and the previous owner had warned me it was unfinished and damp. Nothing down there but concrete walls and dust. I hadn't stepped foot in it once. I told myself it was the wind. Maybe I hadn't latched the door properly. I closed it, locked it, then went to bed. And at 3 a.m., I woke up to the sound of footsteps. Soft, slow, not from outside, not from the hallway, from below me, the basement. I held my breath, staring at the ceiling, heart hammering. The footsteps weren't wandering. They were pacing, back and forth, back and forth. Then, they stopped. Silence crawled through the house. I squeezed my eyes shut, convincing myself it was just the old pipes settling. I didn't sleep again that night. By morning, I had rationalized everything. The drawer, the basement door, the footsteps. It was all in my head. Stress, sleep deprivation, the house settling. I almost believed it, until I checked the security footage. I had set up a cheap camera outside my front door when I first moved in, just in case. I hadn't checked it in weeks. But when I played it back, my stomach turned to ice. Because at 2:47 a.m., the basement door had opened by itself. Slowly, smoothly, like someone had been standing on the other side, turning the handle from below. I stared at the screen, my breath coming in short, panicked gasps. I had locked that door. I knew I had, but there was no forced entry. No one had broken in. So how the hell had it opened? A sinking dread settled over me. Because if someone was inside the house, they had already been there before I locked the door. I grabbed my phone and car keys and left the house without even changing out of my pajamas. I drove around aimlessly, gripping the wheel, my mind racing. What the hell was I supposed to do? Call the cops and say, "Hey, I think my basement is haunted"? Go back inside and pretend nothing happened? I didn't know what to do, so I did the worst possible thing. I went back inside. It was still early, barely 7 a.m., but the house felt different, like it had been waiting for me. I stood in the kitchen, staring at the basement door, trying to convince myself that opening it was a good idea. I stepped forward, placed my hand on the knob, and twisted. The door swung open. The air that hit me was cold, stale, the smell of rotting wood and dust. I stood there for a long moment, listening. The house was silent. No footsteps, no movement, just the black maw of the basement stretching below me. I reached inside, felt for the light switch, flipped it. Nothing, just darkness. Then, something moved. A soft shuffle at the bottom of the stairs, like fabric against concrete. My breath hitched. I couldn't see anything. Just an endless, yawning void staring back at me. I took a step back, and the door slammed shut, right in my face. I stood there, heart hammering, hand still on the knob. I twisted it. Locked. The door that I had just opened was now locked from the other side. I bolted out of the house, hands shaking so bad I could barely hold my phone. I called the cops, told them someone had broken in. They arrived 20 minutes later, searched the entire house. Nothing. No signs of forced entry. No one hiding inside. Just an empty basement. I didn't stay another night. I packed a bag, booked a motel, and tried to convince myself I was being paranoid, that I had overreacted, that the basement was just old and weird and drafty. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I had done exactly what it wanted, that the house had been waiting for me to open that door. And now, it knew I would come back. I've always been a light sleeper. The smallest noise, creaking floorboards, a gust of wind against the window, wakes me up instantly. That's why, when I heard footsteps in my house at 2 a.m., I knew they weren't mine. And I knew I wasn't alone. It was supposed to be a quiet weekend. My roommate, Matt, had gone out of town, leaving me with the place to myself. No loud music, no dirty dishes piling up in the sink, just peace and quiet. I spent the evening binge-watching horror movies, stuffing my face with microwave pizza, and scrolling through my phone. By midnight, I was ready to crash. I double-checked the locks, shut off the lights, and crawled into bed, letting the familiar sounds of the house lull me to sleep. Then, just past 2 a.m., something woke me up. A soft creak in the hallway. Then, footsteps. Slow. Measured. Someone was walking through the house. At first, my brain tried to rationalize it. Maybe Matt had come home early. Maybe I was imagining things. But as the footsteps moved closer, a sickening realization settled in my gut. Whoever was in my house was barefoot. I held my breath, my heart hammering against my ribs. I listened. The footsteps paused, just outside my bedroom door. Then, tap, tap, tap. Fingertips gently tapping against the wood. Not knocking, just testing. I clenched my fists beneath the covers. I had locked the door before bed, hadn't I? I couldn't remember. The tapping stopped. Then the handle turned. A cold wave of terror washed over me. The knob twisted slowly, like whoever was on the other side was being careful, testing if it would open. I felt like a rabbit, paralyzed in a snare. I should have jumped up, grabbed something heavy, made a noise to scare them off. But I just lay there, gripping the sheets, too scared to move. Then, the door creaked open an inch. I bolted upright, reaching for my phone. I turned on the flashlight, shining it toward the door. Nothing. The hallway was empty. I was alone. I scrambled out of bed, flicking on the overhead light, my breath coming in short, panic bursts. The door was open wider now. I could have sworn I locked it, but there was no one there. No sounds. No footsteps retreating. Just silence, like whoever had been standing there had never really left. I spent the rest of the night in the living room, every light in the house on, a kitchen knife clutched in my hands. I didn't sleep, didn't move, just sat there, watching the hallway, waiting. By morning, I had convinced myself it was just my imagination. Sleep paralysis. A dream so vivid it had felt real. That's what I told myself. Until I saw the footprints. They were faint, but they were there. Bare footprints smudged into the hardwood floor, leading from my bedroom door all the way to my closet. My stomach dropped. The closet. I hadn't checked it. Slowly, I backed away, my breath coming in shallow gasps. The door was closed, but not all the way. A thin, black sliver of space was visible in the gap. I reached out with a shaking hand, took a deep breath, and pulled the door open. Nothing. Just my jackets and shoes. I let out a ragged laugh, pressing a hand against my chest. No one was there. No one had been there. I was just losing it. Then, I noticed something on the top shelf. A small, folded piece of paper. Frowning, I pulled it down, unfolding it slowly. A single sentence was scrawled across the page in shaky handwriting. You forgot to check under the bed. My blood ran cold. I dropped the paper, stumbling backward, my pulse roaring in my ears. I hadn't looked. I hadn't even thought to check. A sickening fear coiled in my stomach. I had spent the entire night sitting in the living room. But what if they had been hiding in my room the whole time? What if, while I was downstairs, clutching a knife and watching the hallway, they were lying under my bed, waiting for me to come back? I didn't stay to find out. I grabbed my keys and bolted. Didn't even stop to pack a bag. I just left, and I never went back. But sometimes, late at night, I wake up gasping for air, convinced I hear bare footsteps on the floor. And I wonder if I had checked under the bed that night, would I have seen something staring back? I used to love being home alone. There's a certain freedom to having the house to yourself, eating whatever you want, blasting music, staying up way too late. But ever since that night, the night I learned someone had been watching me, I don't think I'll ever feel safe alone again. It started with the notes. The first one showed up in the mailbox. A single piece of paper, folded neatly, no envelope, no stamp. At first, I thought it was a prank. Then I read it. I like your house. I frowned, scanning the empty street. I live in a quiet neighborhood, cul-de-sac, friendly neighbors, The kind of place where nothing ever happens. I figured it was just a dumb joke and tossed the note in the trash. Then, 2 days later, another note slipped under my front door. I like your room. A cold chill crept down my spine. I checked the locks, the windows. Nothing looked disturbed. But the idea that someone had been close enough to leave this note, that they knew where my room was, that part unsettled me. I told myself it was just a coincidence. Then, a week later, I found the third note, taped to my bedroom window. I like watching you. I felt sick. I double-checked the doors, the windows, the backyard gate. I even installed a cheap security camera over the porch. I told my parents about it when they got home that weekend, but they weren't concerned. It's probably just some kid messing around, my dad said, brushing it off. Tell us if it happens again. I nodded, but deep down, I knew this wasn't some dumb prank. Because whoever was leaving the notes, they were getting closer. That night, I could barely sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I imagined someone standing outside, watching through my window. Then, just past 3 a.m., I heard it. A soft tapping on the glass. I sat up, heart hammering, my breath catching in my throat. The room was dark, but the curtains were open. For a split second, I thought it was just a tree branch. Then I saw it. A handprint on the glass. I lunged for my phone, my hands shaking as I pulled up the security camera feed. My stomach dropped. The footage was static, like someone had tampered with it. I forced myself to move, peering out the window, but there was no one there. Just the faint outline of something smudged against the glass. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. And in the morning, there was another note. This time, inside the house. It was waiting for me on the kitchen counter. A single piece of paper, folded neatly. My hands trembled as I picked it up, unfolding it slowly. You left the back door unlocked. I nearly dropped it. My knees went weak. The back door. The one that led into the yard. The one that I knew, without a doubt, I had locked before bed. I spun around, scanning the room, every hair on my body standing on end. Someone had been inside the house. While I was asleep, I ran through the house, checking every door, every window. Nothing was broken. Nothing was stolen. Whoever had come in, they didn't want my things. They wanted me. I called my parents. They told me to call the police, but I could already hear the doubt in their voices. A few missing notes. A door left unlocked. It wasn't exactly a crime scene. Still, they said they'd be home by morning. That was good enough for me. I just had to get through one more night. I locked everything. Double-checked the back door, wedging a chair beneath the handle. Then I barricaded myself in my room, gripping the baseball bat under my bed. I wasn't sleeping. Not after what happened. Around 2 a.m., I heard it. Not a tap this time. A voice. Soft. Muffled. Coming from inside the house. I barely breathed. Then, a whisper. Right outside my bedroom door. Let me in. My whole body locked up. The voice was low, rasping. Not familiar. Not human. I gripped the bat, my hands slick with sweat. The door handle jiggled. Once. Twice. Then, silence. I sat there, frozen, for what felt like hours. Then, finally, the sun started to rise. The first golden rays crept through my window, and I exhaled a shaky breath. I had made it. It was over. Or so I thought. Because when I finally worked up the nerve to open my bedroom door, I found the last note, pinned to the hallway wall, right across from my room. A single sentence, written in messy, jagged letters. See you tonight. Please like and subscribe. Every bit of support means the world.